Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on February 17th, 2023, and is current through the Star Trek Picard Season 3 premiere, The Next Generation, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from lots of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest and co-host of the Divine Treasury podcast on the Trek Geeks Network. It's Jamie Rogers. Jamie, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hey, Alex. So good to be back. I always love hanging out with you, my friend.
Well, Jamie, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, you know, these days it's really tough to be a Next Generation fan. There's really not a whole lot going on, I guess, you know? I mean, obviously I'm being a little sarcastic, but no, I'm excited about Picard Season 3. You know, the first episode dropping. Yeah, I mean, this is like dream come true. Getting to see this cast back together again, and I'm excited to see how the season plays out. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, how could it not be Star Trek Picard Season 3? It's here. It's good, right? The first episode's out so far. I have a review up on TrekCore, which is a non-spoiler review of the first 6 episodes of the season. And, you know, I talk in there about how much I have enjoyed the episodes that I have seen of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And it's also just really nice to, like, for everybody to be seeing it and for us to be able to talk about it and, like, you know, like, talk about how great it is and how much we're enjoying it. And, you know, and we will certainly do plenty of that this episode.
Oh, yeah.
What did you like most about this first episode?
Well, I mean, I think it's nice to see, you know, I mean, obviously we saw in Picard Season 1, we saw the dynamic between Riker and Picard, but it's nice to kind of see that the two of them kind of getting together, kind of doing their, you know, kind of going on their little mission together. Because we, like I said, we saw it in Season 1, but we really didn't see it like this, you know, now. And obviously I'm excited to get into some of the news stories, but I'm kind of looking forward to seeing perhaps some of the conflict that, you know, kind of Terry Matalas is talking about and things like that. So nice to see Crusher, see her back in the mix as well. So there are a lot of things that I really enjoyed about that first episode, and a lot of mystery, a lot of questions. Is right. All I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the Picard-Riker dynamics that I think are the most fun part of that first episode, right? Like, and not just sort of, I mean, to your point, we've gotten some Picard-Riker dynamics so far in Picard, but it feels like the character that we met in Season 1 is a little different from the character that we meet in Season 3. And the sort of scenario and circumstances of their meeting, as much as Nepenthe is an incredible episode, it's like, I don't know, it's nice to see them back doing Starfleet things again, right? Like, Making Pizza's awesome, and it's a terrific character episode, and it's entirely elevated by Kestra Troy Riker, but it's also just really nice and really cool to see them back on a starship and, you know, having sort of an interesting dynamic and going out on an interesting mission to save a friend. It's just like, yeah, I'm in. I'm totally in.
Yeah, you know, and obviously there's a lot to this Crusher story that we're kind of diving into, and, you know, I like that that's kind of the mystery that's set up. It's like, what's Picard and Crusher's relationship like? Why haven't they talked in a long time? You know, these are all questions that, as a huge TNG fan, I can't wait to see the answers to.
Yeah, right. All right, well, let me tell you what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, which obviously is Star Trek Picard Season 3, but I wanted to pick out one small thing, which is something that, like, as I read more about this season, and as I listen to more interviews about the season, and as I reflect on the first episode, and like the thing that I picked for this is the new space dock, right? The, like, you see it in the season premiere. It looks very similar to the space dock from the TOS movies, but it's like an upgraded version of it. It's a bit bigger, it's a bit fatter, think I'm describing myself through the pandemic now, but it's also like more, it's cooler and like more rad.
It's sleeker.
It's sleeker. Oh, now it definitely does not describe me. And it is for me symbolic of sort of a thing that is across both the whole of the first episode and I think recurs, it's not a spoiler to say, like, is something that continues down the line, which is a sort of idea of it is very much like so deeply connected to the world of before and kind of continuing that onwards, right? Like, it is not just the space dock from the 23rd century, right? Clearly at some point it's been replaced, but it's been replaced by one that's bigger and better. And that kind of sort of runs through that whole first episode, right? Like, you've got stuff that kind of ties back to, earlier sort of TNG movie era. The SS Ilios is clearly a ship from that kind of time period, right? With the very specific yellow and purple LCARs and Crusher carrying around, the sort of Type 3B phaser from First Contact, right? Like, but then you hit the new space dock and you go inside the new space dock and then you hit the Titan and it's like, okay, this is new, right? Like, is it 20 years later and it's new, but it's also just very much in line with everything that's been seen before. And I did sort of talk about this a little bit in my review, which is this sort of sense that Picard season 3, more than any of the other shows, with the exception of the animated shows, is really, I think, reveling in, and this is always such a loaded word to use this because then it immediately like push your glasses up on your face, but it is reveling in the canon of Star Trek, right? That while that is not my favorite way of describing it, it is the most accurate way of describing it, and I'm just really liking it.
Yeah, and kind of along your same line of thought as well, I really see the connectivity between the Titan and the Stargazer from season 2 as well.
Right.
You definitely see cohesiveness between those two ships, like how the bridge looks. You don't feel like you're going into two completely different worlds.
Right.
Going from season 2 to season 3. So it's kind of falling along that same theme of basically how the technology has evolved and what the ships are like in the 25th century.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, after nearly a year of excitement, build-up, and speculation about the third season of Star Trek Picard, it's finally here with the premiere of The Next Generation. What a well-titled episode this week. And following on from the red carpet premiere event that took place in Los Angeles last week. On the red carpet, TrekCore had the opportunity to catch up with Picard Season 3 showrunner Terry Matalas and talk a little bit about the show. In the interview, Matalas talked about how surprised he was that the return of the Next Generation crew did not leak before the news was officially announced. It is crazy that it didn't get out. We shot almost 4 months before we announced it. I don't know. It's not like we had tents or anything like that. We just did our best, but we didn't go as hard as Star Wars or Marvel would. I also don't know necessarily if there was any kind of speculation or eyes on it in that way. And Matalas expanded on comments he made on the Inglorious Treksperts podcast a few months ago about a dropped subplot from the season featuring Naomi Wildman by talking a little more about what story the character would have had if she had appeared in Picard. He said, quote, "We broke an episode where Naomi Wildman was a Fenris Ranger, following in the footsteps of Seven of Nine, and maybe she was a bit more aggressive in her style than Seven. The crew this season certainly gets into some trouble, and Seven might have needed to go to somebody for help, and that person would have been Naomi Wildman. Ultimately, there just wasn't the real estate for it this season. I love the story. I'd love seeing that. However, I'd love to do more and stay in this time period. And that's a character you would absolutely want to see again." Well, Jamie, we've obviously already sort of started talking about how much we love Picard Season 3. You talked a little bit about that sort of nostalgia factor. We talked a little bit about some of the newness of it. Give me something else. What was something else you enjoyed from that first episode?
Well, there's just so many things. I don't know where to start, but you talked about the Type 3 phaser. You talked about Crusher. Actually, I do want to kind of talk about the Naomi Wildman thing. I'm actually kind of glad they didn't go in that direction. I'll be honest with you. I love the character, but I kind of really felt that there's just no room for her with all the characters they have, with the Next Generation cast. I just feel like it would have been kind of shoehorned in if they would have tried to bring her back somehow. Because I mean, we're even seeing new characters that we've never seen before.
How do you feel about Captain Shaw?
Oh yeah, Captain Shaw. Captain Shaw is something else. I certainly hope that he gets redeemed somehow in this season, but he's not starting off as somebody that is really a likable character. But I've got to give it to the actor. He's doing a phenomenal job of playing somebody who is not likable at all. But yeah, he's a very interesting character. And, the dynamic between him and Seven of Nine obviously is very interesting, very, very interesting to say the least. And, I wonder how that relationship is going to evolve and that dynamic is going to go as the season goes on as well. But it's definitely an interesting situation to say the least.
Yeah, in his review for Trek Core for the first episode, Jim Morehouse talked about how Todd Stashwick's Liam Shaw was his favorite kind of character from the season and probably one of his favorite new characters we've seen in a really long time. And I 1000% agree with that. It sort of is looking a little bit forward to say that the character has this, arc to him, and he does. I'm not going to talk about what it is, but it is so fun, and Stashwick himself is so good in this episode as just immediately being the foil. And I talked a little bit about this in my review, which is it did suck to have to say goodbye to some of the actors from season 1 and 2, right? Evan Evagore, Sabrionis, Alison Pill, Santiago Cabrera, and everybody was like, oh well, part of the reason why that particularly sucks is because we're sort of shoehorning out new characters in favor of more space for old characters who've had plenty of time. And I actually don't think that's what Picard is trying to do, right? And you even the premiere is sort of that way as well, in that you have a combination of old characters, right? There's a ton of Picard and Riker stuff in this episode, but it starts to introduce you to the characters on the Titan, and there are some really cool characters this season. And yeah, to your point about Naomi Wildman, right? I came into this season wanting it to be a cameo fest, right? I was just load it down, right? I want every episode there to be a new legacy character that we haven't seen before who's not one of, right? I want the TNG main cast and I want those people. And actually, I'm kind of glad the final product is less that. That's not to say there aren't some big unannounced legacy characters who appear this season who have not yet been announced, because there are. But it's also to say that at least, the ones that I have seen, it's not overstuffed.
Yeah.
And it is very much just sort of focusing on both the TNG characters, but also these new characters too. And it's sort of in that way is this is the original premise for Star Trek Picard now being executed, not sort of well as in comparison to not well for season 1 and 2. I know there are fans who don't like season 1 and 2. I personally like season 1 and 2. So that's sort of not the comparison that I'm drawing. But I definitely see that 1 and 2 had significant flaws to them. So far, over 6 episodes, I feel like 3 has surpassed 1 and 2. So to me, it just sort of feels like, okay, well, this is closer to how do you hit a home run for that original premise.
Absolutely. It's actually kind of cracks me up that you say that Morehouse loves Shaw, seeing he's such a hater of Jellicoe. I'm kind of surprised that Mr. Morehouse loves Captain Shaw.
I think we'll just have to wait and see.
I think we will.
My sense is that Jim's love for the character and his hatred for Edward Jellicoe, that the comparison will become clear in the fullness of time. But yes, on the face of episode 1.
Listen, I couldn't not say it. I'm sorry.
Well, in addition to Matalas, Trek Core also had the opportunity to speak with Jonathan Frakes, who appears throughout this season as William T. Riker and directed the 3rd and 4th episodes of this season. Frakes talked about his decision to return to the role of Riker in a big way this season, saying, quote, "That's Terry's fault. Terry Matalas said to me while we were shooting season 2, are you ready to bring Riker back? I said, well, Riker was back in season 1. Picard had a nice visit with Riker and Troy. He said, but I'm talking about really bringing him back. So he pitched this kind of Butch and Sundance story to Patrick and me at lunch. Not that I was ever going to resist coming back to Star Trek. It's only changed my life for the better 35 years ago. So it has been a dream, and Terry's a great showrunner and a great friend, and he really loves and knows Star Trek." and about what it was like to both act in heavily and direct episodes 3 and 4 of this season. Frakes said, quote, "I did have a lot of help. The guy who directed the first 2 episodes of the season, Doug Aronofsky, is a friend, and we worked together a lot on the other Star Trek shows. So he was really co-directing with me. He stayed on the Video Village and let me know what he thought, and I trust him, and we have similar tastes. And Terry was in, so I didn't go too far off the rails, but I like doing both jobs." Jamie, what do you think about Jonathan Frakes' performance as Riker in this season of Star Trek Picard?
Oh, I'm excited. I loved how he was in the first episode. And to be honest with you, in this interview, he kind of alludes to the fact that there's going to be a lot of conflict between our legacy characters. And to be honest, I mean, I'm looking forward to that because that's something we really haven't seen in Next Generation. We think of Next Generation and think of Gene Roddenberry's vision of there can be no conflict between the main cast. I mean, I know we kind of saw it in some of the later seasons, I think of Pegasus, for instance, and episodes like that. But I'm looking forward to see how, he's alluding to this rift between Picard and Riker, kind of, that they're going to have some issue. So I kind of want to see how that plays out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think Frakes is so good. I mean, he's so good in this episode. The man has really not missed a beat, given that, he's not been seriously acting in like years at this point, right? Like he's mostly sort of transitioned over to being a director. And now we know it's been said that he's in all 10 episodes this season. And so like, that's a lot, right? That's a lot for Frakes to kind of do. And you could kind of have imagined and potentially forgiven him for like, being a bit rusty, being a bit, like off the rails a little bit, taking some time to sort of get back into the character. But like, that's not the case at all, right? Like, sizzling from the first scene that he's in. And Riker is one of my absolute all-time favorite characters in the Star Trek franchise. So, I'm obviously a huge Riker stan. So having more of the character is definitely wonderful. And also, setting up a little bit of conflict, at least in this episode, between him and his successor in the captain's chair, Shaw, is also fun. And I'm, looking forward to people seeing how that ultimately plays out. But yeah, Frakes is so good this season. He is one of the standouts, in my opinion. And I actually think, this sort of comes through a little bit in this episode for me. In some ways, having the main cast members of the Next Generation back actually does kind of pull Sir Patrick's performance back to a slightly more TNG Picard-y place. Like, I think it is certainly true to say that for certainly like just in this episode, right? Frakes and Stewart, Picard and Riker, there has been a certain amount of convergence between those 4, right? Like Frakes and Riker are more similar today than they were in 1987. Picard and Stewart are more similar today than they were in 1987. But like, putting back in some of those old dynamics does start to like, it just feels very Next Generation-y, and I really like it. And yeah, Frakes does an incredible job this season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can't wait to see the other characters come in and how their dynamics play off each other. Like, I think I'm the most interested to see Worf and how he kind of fits into everything. And, some of the things of the trailers about, him being a pacifist. And I just have a feeling he's going to be really good in like comic relief somehow, those little quips and anecdotes, throughout the season.
Well, and we have a rare bit of unexpected good news this week for international Star Trek fans. Star Trek Lower Decks and Star Trek Picard are coming to Paramount Plus. Picard and Lower Decks, which had previously only been available on Amazon Prime Video outside the US and Canada, will be coming to Paramount Plus in the United Kingdom, Australia, Italy, France, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with South Korea following later this year. New episodes of Picard and of Lower Decks will drop the day after their release on Paramount Plus in the US, which mirrors the Amazon Prime Video release. So, for example, if you're in one of those countries, you can head on over to Paramount Plus right now and watch the Season 3 premiere of Star Trek Picard. The shows will also still be available on Amazon Prime Video, so if you're one of those people who has Prime Video and not Paramount Plus, you will still have access to Picard and to Lower Decks. And obviously, in all of the territories where Paramount Plus is not yet available, Amazon Prime Video remains the only place to go to get your Picard and Lower Decks fix. But if you're in one of the countries I named and maintaining 2 separate streaming subscriptions just for Star Trek, well, you can now reduce that to just 1. All of the modern Star Trek shows are on Paramount Plus moving forward. Jamie, what do you think about this rare good news for international Star Trek fans?
Well, I think it's awesome. We always obviously love our international family, our Star Trek. I feel like the last time I was on Weekly Trek, we were talking about this coming up in the future. So it's great that they can see it and see it kind of like we're seeing it as well. Because sometimes I feel like they always get they're like second fiddle sometimes, getting it well after we do, and it's nice to see that Paramount Plus is finally catching up to the international audience.
Yeah, this is just genuinely unabashedly good news, right? Like, I mean, there's still some elements of it that are frustrating, right? Why does Paramount Plus decide to release these episodes a day after the release in the US when, like, Disney Plus and Netflix, it just drops on the same day worldwide? There's not that sort of 24-hour delay. But Star Trek, in those countries that I mentioned, which are pretty much the ones that have Paramount Plus, outside of the US, all of Star Trek is in one place, with the exception of the short treks and the animated series. I think those are the only things that are not on Paramount Plus internationally. And so, right, like I think flashback a couple of years and it was Netflix for Discovery and it was Amazon Prime Video for Lower Decks and Picard, and then Paramount Plus was announced and it was like, all right, well, Strange New Worlds is going to be over there. And so people looking at the prospects of having to have 3 separate streaming subscriptions to catch all of Star Trek, and there was a level of absurdity connected to that. And it's like, okay, now we've started to unwind that, right? We are getting to the point where, just as it is in the US, if you want new Star Trek, Paramount Plus is the place to go get it. If you want old Star Trek, Paramount Plus is the place to go get it. I guess the one caveat I will have is it follows the same direction as the US market. Right now, Star Trek is only available on Paramount Plus. That's inclusive not just the new episodes, but also the legacy shows as well. And I would not be surprised if in like the UK, for example, we start to see the legacy Star Trek shows phase off of the other streaming platforms to encourage people just to use Paramount Plus. But we've all gotten used to it over the last couple of months. And, it's like, yeah, sure, I wish they were on Netflix and Amazon Prime still. I was in a hotel last week and like it had streaming Netflix on the TV. It didn't have streaming Paramount Plus on the TV. So, I had to like hook in the HDMI to get the Star Trek working. But yeah, so excited about this. Good news for international Star Trek fans. Hopefully this is coming to the end of our like international Star Trek fan travails news stories, and we can just kind of, move forward as one big happy fleet from now on. Well, and lastly this week, plans are slowly starting to come together for Eagle Moss collectors to finish their collections. D'Agostini, the international partwork and model company, have announced they are taking over the production and will oversee the completion of the Star Trek Enterprise D build-up collection that halted abruptly when Eagle Moss went bankrupt last summer. Fans who are in the middle of building their Enterprise D can head over to fanhome.com. Yes, that's fanhome.com, and get on the mailing list for information about how to resume their subscriptions. Fans will be able to start their new subscriptions with D'Agostini at whatever point their Eagle Moss subscriptions ended, and the company has signaled its commitment to completing the model for interested collectors, potentially making subscriptions available for newly interested collectors, and providing all the same kinds of perks that Eagle Moss had promised to the build-up collectors. In addition to the Enterprise D build-up, excitement is growing for the latest iteration of the company Master Replicas, which appears poised to announce that it will be selling off the majority of the remaining stock of Star Trek collectibles produced by Eagle Moss. Plans for the sale have not yet been publicly announced, but a countdown clock on their website indicates we should know more in about 2 weeks from the time of recording. No news yet about whether a company might be willing to make new Star Trek Starship models. I think I'd definitely like a Titan A after this last week, but in my interview with Ben Robinson that we released the audio for on this podcast feed last week, he signaled some confidence that news would be forthcoming on that front too. Jamie, you were an Enterprise D build-up collector who got screwed by the fact that Eagle Moss went bankrupt. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling much better. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've kind of been it's been a little bit of a roller coaster for me. I've felt very frustrated at different points. I've, felt like I've lost my steam for the build, but as we get closer to this kind of coming to a resolution, I'm happy. I did have something to report that when I was moving my Enterprise D and my storage unit did fall, and I did mess up a couple of, some of my saucer plates, but it's going to be nice how they're setting this up where you can pretty much start from any point in the build.
Yes.
And the other piece of this too is, what I'm hoping is I'll be able to get some of those little pieces that are maybe broken and kind of be able to fix it. So I'm excited. And I know the second I get those first 4 kits of my, issue 21, I'm going to be rearing to go again and, I'm going to get that fire back. So it's definitely exciting to see this come into a resolution soon.
What also sounds like lots of the collectors who were mid-subscription are, planning now to continue. This is their opportunity to finish it. But also there have been some people who have decided, I'm done with this. So there is a decent amount of secondary market now for like pieces of you break something, you can probably find someone who has one that they're selling because they don't need it anymore because they're not planning to ultimately complete.
The other thing too is I'm just wondering, and I haven't seen any communication on this at all from Fan Home, but I wonder if I think some of the people that were in my position are kind of in a place now because of what happened with Eagle Moss, where they'd love to just be able to buy the rest of the kits
sure.
to not have to worry about going
yes.
through this again. So, I really hope that at some point they say, okay, well, if you want to buy it in bulk as opposed to doing the mail order type setup, something can be arranged. I really hope that they do that, because I think that'll entice some of these people that are on the fence to come back to it. I think some people are a little gun shy because of what happened, and they're a little afraid maybe that they're going to get burned again.
Sure.
So I really hope that they kind of make that decision to go that route as well.
If it was available, would you take that option?
I would. Yeah, because like I said, I just don't feel like
just get it done
again.
Yeah, right.
Like the gap has caused me to lose fire in the build. It really has. And it's just, and even now it's like, well, it was supposed to be ready to go the end of January, so you're still kind of anxiously awaiting, okay, when's the next announcement? When are they going to start shipping? When are they going to reach out to you? So I'd love to just be able to have all the kits, even if I go at a slow pace, and just be comfortable that I'll be able to complete it.
Yeah. It certainly is like a good thing that like there is an end, right? I mean, given, the bankruptcy was unexpected and hey, it just sort of happened and here we are. And, it's I think it certainly is very encouraging that collectors will have the opportunity to finish the Enterprise D build up. Obviously for me, I'm more interested in some of the other collectibles, less so in the sort of selling off of the existing stock. I don't necessarily there were a couple of models that had been announced, like the USS Vancouver from Lower Decks and the Caretaker's Array, that hey, if there were a bunch of them and they pop up in the, official sales, I might pick up them. But I'm also not, it's sort of in the same way as you. I'm no longer in the place where I'm like, I have to get every single one of them, right? Like under all circumstances. But having said that, though, I would really like for somebody to pick up making at least the sort of major ships from the shows that we've had to date, right? Since Eagle Moss went bust, the Protostar, the Dauntless, the Titan A, through gritted teeth, Enterprise F, Picard version, some of these sort of big ships that have been in these episodes that lots of people are really interested in seeing, right? It doesn't have to be every alien ship or all this, that, and the other, the way that Eagle Moss had been doing it, but at least some of the big hero ships would be really, really nice. And this sort of fast forwards a little bit into my theory, but I think there's another very big ship coming, and it'd be nice to have a model of it when we get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've kind of lost my fire for some of the other, the other ships in the collection. I mean, as you know, I had the XLs, I had the regular ones. Because of what happened with Eagle Moss, I ended up starting to sell off some of the smaller ships just because now I couldn't complete it. And
right,
I kind of said, well, I'm going to kind of just do the legacy ships, like the all the Enterprises and things like that. But to your point, when I was seeing some of those lower deck ships come out, and then all of a sudden to have the rug pulled out from underneath us, I probably would get some of those lower deck ships and some of these new ships that are coming out. The Titan for sure. This new Titan looks really sleek, and that new Stargazer too from season 2 would be another one that
absolutely
probably would sway me. But we got to wait and see.
More waiting, more seeing. All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain, but it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guests and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Jamie, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
All right, so this is a little bit of a crazy one.
Oh, I love crazy ones. Go for it.
All right, so obviously we see kind of Raffi in a Section 31-esque type role here.
Yep.
In this first episode. My prediction is that there's going to be another show coming out. Michelle Hurd's going to be in it because we've been hearing about this Section 31 stuff.
Okay.
And I feel like there's going to be some legacy characters from the Next Generation cast that may be a part of this Section 31 show, and Michelle Hurd's going to be part of it, and that's going to be a new show that's coming out. I don't think like Patrick Stewart's going to be involved and most of the TNG characters, but that there's going to be some sort of season 3 of Picard is going to continue Terry Matalas down in this, because he's continually mentioned that he wants to play in this sandbox, that he wants to play in this time frame, and I think he's kind of dropping Easter eggs to say this is how they're going to incorporate this Section 31 show. And maybe Michelle Yeoh, because she went into the Guardian of Forever, time is really not an issue, maybe she shows up, I don't know. So that's kind of where my crazy theory is this week.
Interesting. We have competing visions about the breadcrumbs that are being lined up to what is the show that Terry Matalas wants to do next. That's a very interesting one, which I like. I mean, I certainly like, I think your theory and my theory are aligned in the sense that I think we're both theorizing about that Picard season 3 will be a big hit, that they will ask Terry Matalas to do another show, that he has specific ideas in mind and has written some of that into season 3 as a Picard season 4 totally different next show type thing, if it ever comes to be. Let me tell you what mine is. And this actually is not a new theory. I've actually given this theory before, but now I'm doubling down on it because I feel extra sure about it, because I got a couple of the details right.
I like it when you double down.
So the Enterprise F is in Star Trek Picard season 3, which is a real quick, it was on like a when Raffi's looking at all that data on the screen, there's a quick shot of the Enterprise F, and we've seen in the trailer that, it's sort of flying in formation with other ships. There's some fireworks around it. Well, on Instagram this past weekend, the Star Trek Logs Instagram account, which, for like Prodigy, did sort of Admiral Janeway's logs in between each episode, and like does these sort of short audio tie-ins to each of the episodes. They dropped 10 logs all at once last weekend. That was sort of like little sort of primers on what's happened to each of the main Next Generation characters between Nemesis and today. And there's one on the Titan that talks about like the history of the Titan from the original Titan, pre-Riker's Titan, to Riker's Titan, to now the Neo-Constitution class Titan. And then there's one log on the Enterprise. And it goes through the history of each of the Enterprises. It talks about how the Enterprise E was decommissioned at some point in some classified mission. Clearly, they're sort of holding those details because they think they might want to do something with it at some point. And then it talks about the Enterprise F. And what it says about the Enterprise F is that the Enterprise F is about to be decommissioned, that it suffered severe damage in something called the Monfett Gambit. Christopher Monfett's one of the, or I might be Monfetti, is one of the writers of Star Trek Picard season 3, and that it's about to be decommissioned. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the little quick shots we've seen in the trailer at this stage, that is the decommissioning ceremony for the Enterprise F. That's my theory, right? And I'm not giving you a theory that's like, I've seen this in an episode and now I'm just pretending it's my theory. I'm just genuinely a theory. So we're going to see the decommissioning ceremony for the Enterprise F. I think that's what those shots in the trailer are. And my theory from before was like, how big is the Enterprise F going to be in the season? I was like, I don't think it's going to be very big. I think it's going to get decommissioned. I think it's going to make way for the Enterprise G. And I am more convinced than ever that this season will end with the Enterprise G for a few reasons. One, the Enterprise F is being decommissioned, which, is sort of that's a story choice, right? We're taking one Enterprise off the board. What do you do if you take one Enterprise off the board? Well, normally you put another Enterprise on the board, right? That's reason number one. Reason number two, it's always felt weird, wrong, does not comport with my understanding of reality, that you would get Doug Drexler and John Eaves back doing a Star Trek show, and that they would be okay with the Enterprise being designed by Adam Eel for Star Trek Online, right? Like, it just never sat right with me that those guys would have the opportunity to make another Enterprise, maybe the last Enterprise they'll ever have the opportunity to make in their careers, and they would decide not to take advantage of it. Reason number two. Reason number three, what has Terry Matalas been talking about he clearly wants another show, right? Every interview, every single interview. First of all, lots of people have been asking him, but even if they don't ask him, he finds a way to drop in, like the comments he gave to Trekcore, right? Like Trekcore didn't ask him, do you want to do another show? But Terry found a way of saying, I want to do another show, right? I want to do more in this time period. I want to do more here. And he's talked about that show being sort of a Star Trek legacy show, right? Star Trek sort of legacy characters. He's talked about the handing of the baton from one generation to the next, right? Like the next generation has been sort of a something that we've heard bandied around. And so my theory is that season 3 of Star Trek Picard ends on the bridge of the USS Enterprise G with some of the characters that we have seen, these new characters that we've been introduced to. Maybe it's Captain Leon Shaw, maybe it's Captain 7 of 9, right? Like, and some of these other characters that we, may or may not get to know a little bit over the next few episodes, potentially with 1 or 2 of the legacy characters. And that is how the series ends, right? Like the next generation story ends. The next generation story is about to begin. We warp off into the future, and Terry's got his fingers very much crossed that people are like, I want to see those adventures. I want to see the adventures of the next Enterprise with these characters that I have come to really like and enjoy and appreciate in Star Trek Picard season 3. Jamie, what do you think of my theory?
It's a very good one. I like it. I got a couple comments. First of all, I hope that the Enterprise G and most of its components are ready by next Tuesday. I'm going to start with that. Although I'm going to shoot a couple holes in your theory.
Okay.
You're saying about when one Enterprise goes out, they commission another one. Huge gaps in time between the Enterprise B and the Enterprise C.
True, but that all happens off screen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm
thinking Star Trek 3 and 4, right? You decommission Star Trek, the Enterprise in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, quite violently. And by the end of the voyage home, boom, you're back on a new Enterprise, right? Like end of generations
between the B, the C, and the D.
I'm talking like real life production, right? Like people want their Enterprises.
I know.
All right, you said there are a couple of holes. That was just hole number 1. What's hole number
2? That's my only hole. Of course, I want to see the Enterprise G, and I would love to see new adventures with a mixture of legacy characters and new characters. So I hope you are 100% right.
That's where I think we're headed.
Jumping off.
Yep.
And then there'll be another ship that, not Eagle Moss. I don't know.
Yes, another ship for Eagle Moss 2.0.
Yeah, whoever takes on that license. Be another G. But yeah, I bet you Doug Drexler is really salivating at what he could design next.
I am sure. Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Jamie Rogers, for joining me today. Jamie, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I can be reached on Twitter at JMROG84 and Instagram with the same handle. And our show, Divine_Treasury, as well as for our podcast.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the-Tricorder-Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.